So here's what we did. We asked our researchers to start categorizing their budgets, their R&D budgets. So where each one of them spent, and this is sort of the averages of all these companies. We have it down to industry, down to size of companies, so you can look at it more specifically. Nearly a little over a quarter of the budget was spent on compensation for staff. That's pretty typical. You all know that researchers get paid a lot of money. It's very expensive to staff all these people. About 13% of the budget is spent on equipment, lab instrumentation, those types of things. The facilities themselves account for about 12% of their overall R&D budget. Raw materials, 11%, outsourcing, 11%, training and education, about 9%, and the miscellaneous other, which I have the Elsevier logo here, meaning that this is where the information area is. And every company spends different amounts on information, but basically out of this, I'm not saying 17% is spent on information, but that's where it's falling at this point. So this is how the breakdown is here. We have some tools to help you sit down with your account manager and actually help you work through this yourself, so you can take some ROI tools and develop your own analysis. What we found was, I'm showing you a lot of numbers, what we found was overall that if they did not have these tools, they did not use the research tools, they would have to hire additional people. So their cost would go up by 18%. And they made estimates based on the kind of research they did, the size of their company, that little over 18% increase in their compensation costs. They would outsource more because, again, you're doing research that you don't have access to someone else's information. If you don't know that it's been done, you've got to do the research yourself to discover it. So they would outsource more, a 16% increase in cost. And none of these percentages sound significant until you add it up over the cost of an R&D budget. The next line item there was in the training of new people or existing people would go up about 14%. Your research equipment, your systems your costs would go up there about 14%. And we'll continue to go through every line item there, but the basic overall here is 15% total increase in cost. It varies a little bit by company size, it varies by R&D spend, it varies by industry a little bit, but overall it came to about 15.3%. Net increase in cost, or you could say the other way around, savings. But I'm looking at it this way. When your company is saying to you, cut costs, well, how much of a difference is it going to make? And so I've got some calculations here to help you with that. This number carried across fairly evenly across the industries, but there are slight differences. In the process areas, about a 15.8%. In the discrete areas, so automotive, those kinds of areas, about 14%. Slight differences in parts of the world, North America, South America. Europe actually showed a slightly higher area of increase in R&D costs, about 17.5%. Based on the size of the company, the smaller companies actually showed a little bit higher cost increase, probably because they don't have as many people. That's the number one area. They have to hire more people. The annual sales sides, the smaller companies, again, they seem to be more affected by it. And annual R&D budgets. The bigger the R&D budget, it seemed a little bit less, but there's a few anomalies here, such as over $1 billion in R&D budgets was about a 17% increase. So it's we have lots of numbers here. I don't want to bore you with a lot of numbers. But again, keeping in mind the overall average is about 15% increase in costs. So how do we take this and make it mean something to you? We created a worksheet. I'm going to show you an example of a company here where it was done. And you can customize this for you. We have a tool to help you do this. So take an example of a company that has an R&D budget of $50 million. And that company spends about $1 million on information tools. Again, this is very supplier-centric. It's not Elsevier. But let's suppose they were spending $1 million. If the average savings they had was 14.5%, based on the kind of company, the size they were, so I didn't use 15% in this particular case, 14.5% of $50 million is $7.2 million. So the calculation you would have here is that for every dollar spent on this, on information tools, is about $7.25 worth of savings. The nice thing about this is a generic example, but you can customize it to your own needs. So if you go to the first slide here, you break down your budget by area. You can look at the averages here by the kind of industry you are. and make it a very specific calculation for your industry. I would encourage you to do this, because if you could go back to your management and say, well, if you want me to cut, let's suppose this was your example, if you want me to cut $500,000 out of my budget, well, for every $500,000 I spend, I can figure we're going to increase $7.25. For every dollar I spend, it's going to increase $7.25. You can see how it's really costing your company. It's important to make this very customized to your particular company. Otherwise, it's not going to mean anything to a business level. They're going to say, did you really test it on us? Did you really ask these questions to us? Did you really get the information from us? What is your, I don't know what your annual information budgets are, but you can look at your information budgets compared to your savings. It might be even greater than this. Rose quoted a number of $25 for, where are you, Rose? You quoted that study $25 for every dollar spent, right? It might be the case that in some companies where the information spend is not as great, that the impact is even more than $7 per person, so per dollar spent. So the last thing is a little bit more about again, about trying to understand, do these tools help with their objectives? So the first thing I think is really key for the guy who's if you have a business manager who really likes to look at numbers, and you can sit down and say, for every dollar I spend here, here's probably what it's saving us in R&D. If I cut that, then you can figure you're increasing your cost by that much. So in order to do this, we had to kind of first find out what is important to your manager. What is important to you? What's important to a researcher? So the number one item that came up on the list as important to C-level executive was, within the existing product lines, bringing new or improved products to market or extending a patent life. Why? Because it's more money, it's more profit. It's the number one item on their list. And so in descending order, these are the issues that were most important to C-level executives. Responding quickly and effective to customer demands and complaints, competing effectively, developing products that are more profitable. Everything's around money, basically, here. It's what it comes down to. So we wanted to find out if these types of tools have an impact on, or a meaningful impact on, these types of issues. The nice thing is, and it just came out this way, that the number one item that it has an impact on is also the number one priority for the C-level executive, which is creating new products, extending the life of a product, improving a product, all for the purpose of generating more revenue. And 8 out of 10 of them felt that research tools impacted that. So down the line, basically 7 out of 10 people felt that of these top 10 categories for research, for C-level executives, what was important to them, research tools fit that.